All right, this is thoughts on society and sort of the structures that we have in place and our norms. And there are pieces of this that I wanted to talk about for a little bit. So I just want to get the ideas down. And I think in my head I've explored this in two different directions. But I'll just explain it how, in whatever way it'll come out right now. So, first things first, I think I'm really starting to believe, or maybe really consider or give attention to the idea that the flaws that we see in everything and the problems in our society and all of these things that we're trying to address, it's the structure of our schooling, our work culture, our social programs, our how we spend our money, our government, our corporations, social media, the internet, state versus federal issues, like I think that the issues in all of these spaces are not really a matter of evil people pulling the strings. I don't think that anybody could actually be as effective at getting these results if they were trying. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that this is actually just a result of systems put in place that inherently have flaws. And it's a series of generations taking their own twist to these flawed structures, putting in their sprinkling in their regulations, tearing out parts of the playbooks, emphasizing certain things, right? It's just a series of decisions or a series of policies or laws, strategies that play out. And it's partially like this idea that if something's been put in place, and in particular things that have been around for a little bit, like we are so hesitant to take away. We would rather amend or tweak or add clarifications or whatever, versus saying, yeah, that didn't work, let's get rid of it. So it's, and from another point of view or perspective, it's a series of generations inheriting the world and also inheriting the existing ideas or beliefs and not challenging them quite as often as they should, taking things as they are, and taking them for truth. Like, no matter what, like, even, the most, what we would consider the most objectively true or real things are, in this case, in our structures and systems, are things that were made by another human. And so they can be wrong, and they could be flawed. So I don't think that it's like, I really don't know if the problem is, it's not that a matter of bad people that we need to expose and, correct or whatever. I think there are people who lean into these things that are bad people, but like, or they take advantage of them, but I don't think anyone's sitting with a master plan. It's more about, if there's anything that we need to address, it's getting people to understand or to recognize the flaws, and to recognize that we can change these things, and to have like plans of attack, like maybe that's a poor way of saying it, but to have a strategy to tackle these issues. Versus, I think if you're looking at this from there's an evil, there's this evil group of people controlling everything and they're fucking us over. I think that that's sort of too passive of a stance on this. Like, it doesn't require any responsibility. It allows you to deflect any responsibility by just saying, well, you know what? If that's the case, then I don't need to, there's nothing I can do, because I'm, if this is like an organized thing, I don't even know the first place to look, whatever. So I'm just not going to try at all. So I think a better way of seeing all of these issues is kind of the way that Jaron Lanier, I think that's maybe what is so intriguing to me about him, is he's one of the guys that helped build up computers, the internet, and the underlying philosophies around them. And he's, now, today, at least for the last 10, 20 years, has been voicing that, they got some things wrong and that what they built is structurally flawed, right? And so this is a great example, right? This is perfect example of, I don't know him, and he could be a completely different person when he's not on camera. I get the sense that that's not the case. I think he and a lot of the people that he has worked with over the years, they are good people who believe in the things that they're saying. But again, it's just that the math of it, the logic, the real world application, once these ideas come out and they are adopted on a large scale, it moves it from philosophy and ideas to something real, and those aren't always the same. They don't always manifest in the way that it was envisioned. And there are things that you can't account for when predicting the future, and that's a huge blind spot for humans in general. Predicting the future is very challenging, and so this, again, great example of trying to do the right thing, implementing and acting on these ideas, and having the flaws exposed. But again, to go back to Jaron Lanier, the difference in addressing this then is like, it's not, first of all, from his point of view, it's not just go with the flow. It's just not, it's not one of the things that I really like is he doesn't twist or manipulate facts or data or what's going on to sort of justify or support his original ideas. Like, he's very grounded in the reality of the outcome. And so it's saying, hey, that there's no evil plan here. It's, we made these calls based on the right ideas. The real world application of them didn't line up. So we need to adjust. And in this case, it's a big walk back on the original structure. But it allows people to take, and again, the personal responsibility aspect of it. Another, piece of what I like is that he introduces a number of ways for the average person to get involved with that, and to get, and basically he provides the solution. He provides very clearly what an individual can do to begin the change. So one example, he's a big advocate of deleting social media right now, because the current internet structure and the structure around social media and our content and the ad-supported business model of all of that is, so he identifies the problem. It's the ad-supported business model. It's an attention economy. And so the participation of the people, the use of these platforms, and the willingness to pay for content through ads, and by extension their attention, that's the issue. So what do we do about it? We empower the people, the individuals, to say, I don't like that. I would prefer to see an internet, a new system built on a different model, and deleting the accounts. And it doesn't even have to be everybody, but just enough to break that system. Because by choosing not to participate, it de-incentivizes the algorithmic advertising-based strategy. So he makes that all clear, and the individuals can say, now having gained that information, they can't brush that off as a hopeless topic. There is something that can be done, and the responsibility is on the individual. So anyway, those were the thoughts on that. It's not this evil plan. And there was a second kind of idea that I wanted to go into that touches that, but like the approach, the strategy, the systems. Well, I don't, so then, okay, I guess maybe from there it kind of gets into this, like, okay, having just said all of that and the individual responsibility thing, and so then I kind of go, all right, this extends into just about everything and every institution that we have today. And the reason why this is such a scary problem is because these issues, these flaws in our institutions, are at very fundamental levels. They are foundational, cracks, and they require a lot of work many cases, a complete overhaul of the current system or structure. And yet at the same time, it requires people to recognize that that is the current state of these institutions. So to recognize that and to believe in that, because you could be shown that information or given the logic and the facts to support it, but for whatever reason right now it seems far too easy to just dismiss those as I don't even know, like, not true, without having to even really provide any counter. So then there's an additional now hurdle that we have to jump over, which is getting people to even recognize these things as problems. And that right there tends to be where people believe that, I think this idea that there are evil people controlling everything probably comes through that conflict, because it's the people who see that and voice it and provide the information, and they say that to the people in charge, and the people in charge tend to be the ones that aren't willing to accept that that's the state. And I think that has more to do with them having success in the system, and so having their bias. It's what is it, like their personal, like, experiential bias of like, hey, like, I am living proof that the system can work, and therefore I find it hard to believe that what you're saying is true. I think that situation tends to be more accurately the issue than there being some sort of maniacal plan. So we've got, so again, we've gotten to this point, like, recognizing the cracks in the foundation, believing them, and now having to convince people to believe them. And then from there, it's like, okay, we have to have a plan. And because this is such a widespread issue across so many different disciplines, where do you even begin? Because we need complete overhauls in, like, the digital world, for sure. That might need to be priority one, complete reshaping of that structure. And then also education, because the problem of education is also the problem of negligent ignorance, and ignorance in adulthood that is leading to this lack of recognizing the problems, and being more likely to just participate in these systems, and limiting the scope of decision making to a day, even. Like, the furthest, I think that's an element of all of this too, is decision making that really doesn't extend it. Well, first of all, it doesn't really factor in very much from previous generations. It's like the span of the individual's lifetime is the decision making timeline right now, whereas we used to factor in future generations when making decisions. So digital education, our government needs, clearly needs not, doesn't need an overhaul, in my opinion, but it needs, at least in the structure, it needs it just needs regulations and policies designed for specific issues within them. And if there's only one place that it needs an overhaul, it's in the representatives, in the people, in the representation, I think. Which again is probably nothing more than another, like a policy thing, like implementing term limits does that. But again, and so we talk about each of these things, and some of them are big overhauls on the entire structure, and some of them, like in the case of government, is really not massive fixes, but the right ones, really intellectual ones that require self-sacrifice, and we're not seeing a lot of that today. To see a politician advocating for term limits would be surprising, and that's because their livelihoods depend on it, and that's why we've been warned about it throughout all of history. But so then it's the challenge of being like, politicians, you are the people that somehow have to decide to do this. And not only, like, that's the fucking challenge of government, is like when the people want the government to change, but in order to make that change happen, the government has to agree to it and to go through a very formal process of doing it. And you need like a majority, like a significant number of those representatives to get on board with that. Like 2/3 of all of those representatives have to agree to this thing. And so like that's a huge challenge, and kind of an unnecessary one. So then, okay, so I'm going on this tangent about the different things that need to change in order to express this challenge that I have, because like that's another area where people can get deflated and say, well, these are just not possible. There's too many things and they're too big. How do you bring all of these to an individual level? How do you actually allow, make an individual feel like they can contribute? Even like in the past, it would be go and vote. Like that's how you do that. But when one of the issues, and a big issue, has to do with our representatives, our representation, voting doesn't provide that I guess ultimately that reassurance or that comfort that the changes will be made. And so there is this like sense of hopelessness. And the silence is very telling right now, because I want so badly. So I guess maybe this all turns around to say, like, reinforce, like, I don't think it's an evil plan, but it's the flawed system, and it's the evil here is the inability for people to change, or the inability of our change levers to actually do that.